Alrighty, guys. So we have a new MCU movie coming up. It's actually been a while. Like, can you believe it? It's been since July 2024, and now it's going to be February 2024. So it's actually been about 7 months when Captain America: Brave New World opens up in the United States. And look, I mean, there's been a lot said about this movie. There has been a lot said about this movie, and especially from the leakers, the community of leakers and scoopers and whatnot that are like, yeah, Captain America: Brave New World had bad test screenings and it's undergoing reshoots and blah, blah, blah. And look, what is true, I think what we can glean that is true, is that this film has undergone more extensive reshoots than most other MCU films. And it has also definitely been under the influence of a lot of different voices. I think I saw an article that said it had 6 different writers. Now, that article very aptly pointed out that is not necessarily a metric for success or failure in the MCU. For example, it pointed out 2 films that had 6 writers each. And honestly, I think it's a subjective thing. But, the 2 films they pointed out is Spider-Man Homecoming and Ant-Man and the Wasp. And they pointed out, one's an example of a good film in the MCU, and one is an example of a bad film in the MCU. And they weren't even talking about their own opinion. They were just like, yeah, Ant-Man and the Wasp, not so well received. Do we not forget that Ant-Man and the Wasp has something like a 70 to 80% on Rotten Tomatoes? Like, while it was not received the best in the MCU, it was received really well. It's nobody's favorite MCU movie, and if it is, that's awesome. Love that. I actually would love to hear that because I just haven't heard that from anybody. But the article was, I feel like, a little disingenuous. I think Ant-Man and the Wasp was received pretty well. Again, not the best, I think most would agree, but still pretty well. So anyways, Ant-Man and the Wasp had 6 writers. Spider-Man Homecoming, which is one of my all-time favorite MCU movies, had also had 6 writers. So it doesn't necessarily mean anything for Captain America: Brave New World, other than the fact that there were a lot of voices, and it could improve the film and it could not. So there is that. But this film has definitely undergone some turmoil. There are also other mitigating factors going into it. For example, the MCU, while yes, Deadpool and Wolverine was massive, Deadpool and Wolverine was a little bit of a unique film because it was part of another really beloved franchise from the Fox universe, the Deadpool films. It was bringing back Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, right? I think those 2 things, and it was also a really, well-received movie. And so I think those 2 things put together, made it a film that was going to do super well at the box office. I think it just was. It was a kind of unique film. The other mitigating factor, and it's neither wrong nor right or whatever, just to look at this objective fact and say that I think people are just less interested in Captain America, Sam Wilson's Captain America, I should say. Or at least they're not as familiar with Sam Wilson's Captain America. Now, personally, I think Sam Wilson, Anthony Mackie, is great as the new Captain America. But most people, again, rightly or wrongly, are more used to the Steve Rogers version, and they're like, why is Sam now Captain America? I mean, we saw it at the end of Endgame, and even I maintain, I think, not having seen Captain America: Brave New World, because, Captain America: Brave New World could be all about Isaiah Bradley and stuff that was referenced in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and you're like, oh, well, then you did need to watch Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which would be a bummer. But I think based on the trailers, you could probably just go straight from the end of Endgame, where Steve hands Sam the shield, and then just go and watch Captain America: Brave New World and be like, oh, yeah, he's Captain America. But I think that just the idea of, it's a Captain America film, but it's not with Steve Rogers, I'm not as interested, I think actually does have an effect on this film. Just the general lack of interest, comparative lack of interest, I should say, in Captain America: Brave New World. One other mitigating factor is that while, yes, Deadpool and Wolverine was a big boost for the MCU is still not in a great place, I think, relatively speaking. Now, if Captain America: Brave New World is really well received, and even if that film doesn't make a whole lot of money, like let's just say it makes $400 to $500 million, and it crushes critically and fans love it, then Thunderbolts, I think, stands to gain, where Thunderbolts is like, yeah, we're getting back. And if Thunderbolts is also really good, which I think Thunderbolts is going to be great, then that film could push that ceiling. Let's go $600, $700, $800 million. And by the time we get to Fantastic Four, could we be pushing $1 billion again? Because if that film's really great, then, the momentum is back. So it's all about momentum. And I think that there are a lot of mitigating factors that go against Captain America: Brave New World. So all that being said, there were some tracking numbers recently that came out about Captain America: Brave New World's opening box office. And the opening tracking from a lot of different sources have it about in the $85 to $95 million range. Some putting it as low as in the low 80s, $80 million, and some putting the maximum at a high of about $100 million, 105 I've seen as well. So let's go with the range of $80 million to $105 million is the projection, the general range of projections that we've been seeing thus far. Now, I have up here on my monitor pulled up a graph of every single MCU. And by the way, this is all domestic. This is all US based. So I have a graph here of every single opening weekend in the MCU. And the headlines that are going around are saying that, yeah, Captain America Brave New World, if it slots in that $80 to $105 million range, is on the low side. And that is true. Objectively, you can't argue with that. Math is math. You can't argue with that. Counting is counting. And so definitely can't argue with that. But I want to, again, put this into context here a little bit and talk about why I'm actually not particularly worried about this yet. So let's do that. So the number one opening weekend domestically for an MCU film, no surprise, is Avengers Endgame. Now the number, I remember this number when it came out, and it's still, looking at it right now, is staggering. This number is staggering. Avengers Endgame on opening weekend made $357 million. That is more than the gross of The Flash, Shazam, Blue Beetle, I don't know, what even close to the entire gross of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, more than the gross of the Marvels. It is a staggering number that Avengers Endgame made in one weekend. That is a crazy number, and I don't know what film would ever break it, if any. So anyways, that is number one by far and away, because number two is actually a Phase 4 movie, Spider-Man No Way Home. And that's even more impressive because it came out right, at the end of the pandemic, or at least the big brunt of the pandemic, but still in a phase where people were indoors and masking and kind of, not willing to go to theaters, and it still made $260 million. Now, again, that's why I brought up the Avengers Endgame number, because Avengers Endgame made $100 million more than the second place number. From there, you go Avengers Infinity War at $257 million, and then you have Deadpool and Wolverine actually making $211 million on its opening weekend. It was really successful. Other films to make $200 million or more are The Avengers and Black Panther, and then from there you get into the 190s like Avengers Age of Ultron and whatnot. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness actually did really well. Made $187 million, and it made about $900 or so million total. So we start going down, right? We start going down this list, and we get into the range. I want to go down all the way now to the range of where Captain America Brave New World is projected to be. So let's go on the low end here. Right at the same mark as Captain America Brave New World on the low end is Black Widow at $80 million. We have Doctor Strange at $85 million. We have Thor the Dark World at $85 million. We have Spider-Man Far From Home at $92 million. Guardians of the Galaxy, $94 million. And then Captain America the Winter Soldier, $95 million. Iron Man at $100 million. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania at $105 million. And that is really the top end of it. Actually, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, $114 million. This is why, if you look at this list, I'm actually not particularly worried about Captain America Brave New World, just purely based on the box office tracking. Because again, the film could be terrible. The film could be, have like a 20% Rotten Tomato. It could be received so poorly. It could be terrible. So, nothing indicates one way or the other. But look at these films, right? Look at these films. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania made $105 million on its opening weekend, and it just collapsed. It made something like $450 million afterwards. You look at a film like, look at a film like Guardians of the Galaxy, though, made $95 million, and it just went on to be a monster. It made $750 million. Spider-Man Far From Home, this is another key example of this. Spider-Man Far From Home made $92 million, and its international total was $1 billion, right? And again, there are other cases here. Like, sure, Black Widow came out during the pandemic, but like Doctor Strange was, $85 million, new character, right? And in a similar way, because I know people have known Sam Wilson, but it's like a newish character for them as Captain America. And that film went on to make like $600 million. So the films in this range, honestly, give me some hope, because if Captain America Brave New World is really good, and let's even look at the higher end, like I talked about, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 made 115, which is, would be exceeding the maximum that people are projecting for Captain America Brave New World. But that film went on to make $800 million. So I just don't see, like, sure, would you want Captain America Brave New World to make in the $150 million range? For sure. But I think that with all the mitigating factors going against it, right, that, it makes sense why Captain America Brave New World is somewhere down here. I don't think it says anything positively. I don't think it really says anything negatively, other than what we discussed before. Sam Wilson being Captain America is a new thing for people. The MCU is kind of on a downspin, and all the other things we talked about earlier. But look at these films. If Captain America Brave New World is received really well, then it can take the Guardians of the Galaxy or the Spider-Man Far From Home route. And even if, right, because here's the thing. What do we remember from Captain America the Winter Soldier? The fact that it was, it didn't make $800 million. I think it landed at like $700 million or something like that. Do we remember Captain America the Winter Soldier as a failure because it didn't make $1 billion? No, we remember Captain America the Winter Soldier because it was groundbreaking. It changed the way that we saw Steve Rogers as a character in the MCU. If Captain America Brave New World can follow that example, and it doesn't have to make, $800 million, it can make $600 million, $500 million, but it can, revolutionize the way in which we see Sam Wilson as a character. And after the film, everyone's like, wow, love him as Cap. Then that's a win. So there are a lot of positive ways that this can go despite the quote unquote low end. Because if let's just say Captain America Brave New World makes on the low end of its mark, and the Doctor Strange Black Widow realm of around $80 million to $85 million, there are films below that, like, there are some films below that, actually not that many. Ant-Man the Wasp, Shang-Chi, which pandemic, Eternals, pandemic, Thor, Cap 1, Ant-Man, Incredible Hulk, and the Marvels, yikes, box office disaster. But for the MCU at least. But again, sure, would it be on the low end? Yes. But even the films below it, some of them were received pretty well, And I don't think that it doesn't really matter, or I shouldn't say it doesn't matter, but I think that there are other ways to measure success, and also the films in the range of the Captain America Brave New World box office went on to do really good numbers. So I'm not personally worried about this. I'm holding out hope that Captain America Brave New World is an amazing movie, because if it is, then we all win. So guys, let me know in the comments down below, ultimately, where do you think, first of all, if you have a guess of where Captain America Brave New World's opening weekend domestically is going to land, let me know. And then also, where do you think it's going to land internationally? I think in my predictions, I said something like $700 million. That might be on the high end, but I feel optimistic. I think this film is going to be good. I think it's going to be better than people think. It might even be a Rogue One situation where we learn later that there was a lot of production problems, but at the end of the day, they pulled together a great film. Let me know in the comments down below.